For more on the day's political headlines, including one they've just published of their own, Caitlin Huey-Burns and Fin Gómez join us now. Caitlin, of course, is CBS News political correspondent. Fin is CBS News' political director. That means he directs political coverage. Get it? And both of you were up to something today, and it just published a little while ago. Tell us what this is about regarding Tim Scott's presidential campaign.
Yes, Ed. CBS News has learned that Senator Tim Scott, who is widely expected to launch his campaign on May 22nd in South Carolina, will be picking his longtime aide, Jennifer DeCasper, as his campaign manager for that likely bid. She would become the first woman of color to ever run a Republican presidential campaign, an historic first.
And that's an important distinction, Republican presidential campaign, because we've had a handful on the Democratic side. She's served alongside him for quite a bit, right?
Yeah, she came to his office when he was in the House. She served as the chief of staff in the Senate. And they have a very close relationship. And as you know from talking to her, she also has a really compelling backstory. And that's something that she's really hoping to bring to the campaign. And she also noted that she and Scott, you know, they point to their backstories, their personal stories, as a way to relate to voters in a way that other candidates may not be able to. And that's something I think we're going to see highlighted in this campaign. Tell us a little bit more about her backstory, though, because it is really interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. She comes from Colorado, a former prosecutor, a state prosecutor. She went to this University of Michigan, a top 10 law school. But in 2008, her dream was to move to move to D.C. and work on Capitol Hill. It was hard to find a job during that time, of course, as we all remember. The job that she could find was in the back pages of the Washington Post, and it was a ramp agent at Dulles Airport. And she did that for a year. She called it incredibly humbling. She leaned into her Christian faith, and it is something that really sort of expanded her perspective. A lot of the people that she worked with from different countries, and he still keeps in touch with them now.
And I think what's really also interesting to note, just kind of politically, more broadly, as you both know, as we've reported on, it is very hard for women to rise up to the top positions in political campaigns, let alone a presidential campaign. And we actually have, or going to have, 3 at least. Obviously, the Biden campaign, you guys broke that news last week. Nikki Haley's campaign, also a woman campaign manager. We saw a lot of women running campaigns in 2020, but this is significant because you do have women of color now in these positions. And we've talked to a lot of strategists over the years who note how difficult it is for women to gain traction in these positions. So some history already being made in this early campaign.
And if you're going to win races going forward, you got to be hiring and working with and taking cues from women, from minorities, because that is the way the electorate's headed.
Absolutely.
Speaking of Nikki Haley, we have noted, we've been talking about this, how she continues to make the advanced age of certain American political figures a bit of an issue as her campaign continues. So much so we wanted to call it out yet again. Take a look at this.
We won't win the fight for the 21st century if we keep trusting politicians from the 20th century.
If you vote for Joe Biden, you really are counting on a President Harris, because the idea that he would make it until 86 years old is not something that I think is likely. The American people deserve transparency to be able to say that, yes, they're at the top of their game. These competency tests are very simple. They're just about naming things that start with the same letter.
Quickly, Caitlin, she is still in the single digits in our CBS News poll. What's the goal here, and is it working?
It's certainly a way to gain some traction, or at least some headlines. And it's, interesting because it applies not only to Biden, but also to Trump, presumably. And that's a place that, not a lot of other Republicans want to go, as we've talked about before. Some other Republicans don't really want to touch this issue because they know there are liabilities for Trump as well. But I do think it's interesting that she is trying to gain traction with it. It'll be interesting to hear from voters. I mean, our own polling last year showed that most voters wanted some kind of age limit for candidates.
Yeah. She seems to be leaning into that for sure. We'll see. But
it's a little risky also. I mean, with some of the electorate, especially some of those early states where there's a larger percentage of older Americans, 55 and older, 75 and older, who go out to the polls. It's
especially in Florida.
Especially in Florida and Arizona.
And South Carolina.
Yeah, sure.
We'll see. Caitlin Huey-Burns, Fin Gómez, thank you as always.